Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to draw a set of pool balls on a pool table. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm going to draw a rectangle. Then I'm going to use my gradient tool. If you can't find your gradient tool, look under Window, scroll down till you find gradient. We're going to throw a gradient inside there. But I'm going to set this gradient to a 90-degree angle. And I want my darker value to be on bottom and my lighter value to be on top. So for this area, you can make your values or your colors whatever colors you want them to be. That's completely up to you. I'm going to use a couple shades of blue. So I'll have dark blue on the bottom, light blue on top. And this will become essentially my background. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use our rectangle tool again. And we're going to build the side of the pool table. So this will be the section that keeps the balls on the table. So I don't want it to be blue, I want it to be green, more like a traditional pool table. So we're going to use our gradient tool again. And I'm just going to change the color. So if you open up your gradient tool and you double click on these little icons, you can change the color. So I'm going to put dark green on the bottom and a light green on top. Okay, and now I'm going to draw one more rectangle to cover up the rest of my artboard here. And I'll use the same gradient that I used for this middle part. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my layers. I'll lock this layer. And then I'm going to create a new layer. On this new layer, this is where we're going to draw our pool balls. So I'm going to switch from my rectangle tool to my ellipse tool. And I'm going to draw a skinny oval. And we're going to turn the skinny oval into a cast shadow. After we make the cast shadow, then we're going to start drawing the pool balls. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to remove the stroke from that. I don't want a stroke around it. So if you click on the little icon over here where the stroke is, you can take out the color. And now I'm going to go to my gradient tool again. So we're going to be using this a lot for this project. And I'm going to switch my gradient from linear to radial. Okay, so if you look next to type, radial is that middle option. Okay, so I'm going to change the colors. I'm going to put black for the center and white for the outside. So right now my gradient is wanting to make a circular shape, so to adjust that so that it matches the shape of the oval that I drew, I'm going to use this aspect ratio option, and I'm going to switch that to about 30%. So once you choose that, it'll squish that circle into more of an oval shape. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my transparency tool. So if you can't find your transparency tool over here on the right, look under Windows, scroll down till you find transparency. Okay, so with my transparency on and my shape selected here, I'm going to switch it from normal to multiply. So now it's going to give it a look of a fading cast shadow. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my first pool ball. So I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and I'm going to hold shift while I draw this so that it gives me a perfect circle. So if you hold shift on your keyboard while you draw it, it'll keep your dimensions perfect. So right now my gradient is still set to what I had on this little cast shadow area. So we're going to have to open up our gradient tool and we're going to have to make some adjustments. So I'm going to set this back with aspect ratio to 100%, and I'm going to flip-flop the black and white, and I'm actually going to change a couple of these colors. So I'm going to switch this black to more of a gray, and I'm going to add another color. So if I click on the space underneath this gradient bar, I can add another color to it. So if I double click on that, I can then change that color. And I'm going to make it kind of yellow, but I don't want it to be vibrant yellow. So when I open this up, I'm going to use this color scheme, and I'm going to slide my y-axis over to more of a white yellow. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to adjust where the gradient is inside of our shape. So to do that, we're going to come over here to the left side and we're going to use this gradient tool. So probably the first thing you want to maybe do after you select that tool is if you go under view and scroll down, you probably want to hide your gradient annotator. I find it to not be very helpful when it's open, so I usually hide it. So I already have mine hidden, so that's why it says show gradient annotator. But yours will probably be give you the option to hide it. So if you have that option, I would hide it because it's kind of annoying. Okay, so while this shape is selected, I'm going to use this gradient tool. And with this gradient tool, essentially what you can do is you can move where the gradient is coming from. So it can come from all sides, depending on where you click and drag across your shape. So I want mine to come up from the top. So I'll just click up here on the top and drag it down to create a gradient highlight. So it looks like there's a highlight coming from up above on this ball here. Okay, so now what I can do, now that I've got this cue ball, I can just select these two shapes. So with my selection tool, I'll select both shapes, hit Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and I can set this over here. And since this one's going to be a little bit further back, I'm going to scale the size down a little bit, but while I do that, I'm going to hold Shift as to not warp the shape, and I'll just set this over here. May shrink that down just a titch. Okay, so now we already have a cue ball. We need a different ball, so maybe we'll make a number 8 ball, as everybody likes a number 8 ball, or maybe they don't, but 8's a common type of ball. So we're going to make that one. So I'll just click on this circle and I'll open my gradient tool again. And we're just going to change a couple of colors. So I'm going to switch this one to kind of a dark gray. And I'll switch this one to black. And actually, what I might actually do is add another color in here, and I'm going to make this other color green, because I want it to maybe kind of look like I'm getting a reflection of the pool table shining on the surface there. So I might actually make this one black as well. So now I've got the basic shape for my 8 ball. We're going to go ahead and add the number. So I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and I'm going to draw a little circle on here. And I'm going to use a gradient on this as well. So with this gradient tool, I'm just going to delete a couple of these colors. So if I click and select the little circle and just click on this trash can, it will delete the extra colors. So I just want 2 colors in there. So I'll do black and white, so that looks good. Okay, now we're going to add a number to this. So to do this, we're going to grab our type tool over here on the left side, make a little type box. And since I'm going to do an 8 ball, I'll just type in the letter 8. If you want to change the font, just highlight your text here and then go to the top where it says type, scroll down, and you can choose whatever font you want to have for that. Okay, so after you have your font selected, we're going to switch from the type tool to the selection tool, but we're going to leave this still selected. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to type again, and we're going to choose the option to create outlines. Just make sure that you've got your selection tool on when you do that, otherwise it won't work. So once you create outlines, you can now adjust this like you would any other type of shape that you draw on here. So you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, you can spin it around a little bit, however you want to adjust there. And I think what I'll do is I'll maybe use my gradient tool on this as well. So maybe I'll just grab this eyedropper here and I'm going to use the little circle color for that. And I'm going to grab this gradient tool again and I'm going to bring little bit of a highlight on top of my number 8. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make one more ball. We're going to make a striped ball. So to do that, I'm going to take my selection tool and I'm going to drag a box over that, select all of the parts that I just drew, copy them by hitting Control C, pasting them by hitting Control V. And since this one, I'm going to bring this one down a little bit lower, we're going to need to increase the size, because the closer they get to us, the bigger we're going to want them to be. So I might move this over to the side a little bit, and I'll move this over a little bit. Okay, so we're going to make this one a striped ball. So maybe the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my shape here, and I'm going to use the cue ball as my base. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my ellipse tool again, and I'm going to draw a big ellipse here, and I'm going to swap the fill and the stroke. So down here where your fill and your stroke options are, if you click on this little arrow, it will swap the fill and the stroke, because I don't want to have the fill, I just want the outline so I can see through this. So we'll make a nice big oval here, and I'll line that up through here. I'm going to make a copy of this oval, and I'm going to drag this down about here. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my selection tool, select this oval, the second oval, and the circle. So if you hold shift after you click on the first one, hold shift on your keyboard, you can select those 3 without selecting all the other parts of the drawing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Pathfinder tool. So if you can't find your Pathfinder, just look under Windows, scroll down till you find Pathfinder. And with the Pathfinder, what we're going to do is we're going to use the divide option. So right here in the bottom left corner, we'll divide those 3 shapes. So after we divide it, we're going to need to ungroup it. So to ungroup it, you can either go to Object, Ungroup, or you can right click, Ungroup, and then it will ungroup those shapes for you. Okay, so now that it's ungrouped, we're going to deselect it. So we'll just click off to the side to deselect it. And now I'm going to delete these extra circle lines because we don't need them anymore. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in my color for my stripe. So I'll just open up this gradient window here. And maybe I'm going to make my stripe, I'll make it blue, I guess. Or we can make it red. Maybe I'll make it red. So we'll grab a couple of shades of red. So I'll have a light red and a dark red. I'll make that other red a little bit darker. Okay, and then I'm going to take this other gradient tool over here while that shape's still selected, and I'm going to pull down from the top to create more of a highlighted area on the top of that shape. Okay, so when we divided this, it sent our circle to the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this middle piece, and we're going to either go Object, Arrange, and send backwards, or you can right click, Arrange, Send backwards. And we're going to do that a couple times to get our circle to come back into place. So let's go send backwards. There we go. Alright, so we already have an 8 ball. We don't need another one, so I'm going to get rid of the 8 out of there. So grab my type tool, and I'm going to put a new number in here, and it will make this number 9. Or you can make whatever number you want. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so after we type in the number, we're going to switch to our selection tool, and then we're going to go back up to the top where it says type, and we're going to create outlines. So now I can make this a little bit bigger, and I can drag this over, and if I want, I could maybe spin that too. Or if you want to just sit upright, that's cool too. Okay, so I might use the same gradient I used on my 8, use my gradient tool just where the highlight is, make it a little bit brighter on top. And now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my pool stick, my pool cue. Okay, so to draw that, I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm going to draw a rectangle here. And after I draw a rectangle, I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and I'm going to draw an oval to go on top of that. So I want my oval to be the same width as my rectangle, and I want the anchor points on my oval and on my rectangle to line up. So the ones on the left and right. So when you are lining it up, when you see those two pink bars, then you'll know that you've got it where it needs to be. So we'll select those two shapes and we're going to use our Pathfinder tool again, and then we're going to unite those two shapes together. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this. So if I hit Control C to copy, Control V to paste, we'll make a copy. So with this copy, what we're going to do is we're going to color it to make it look more like the stick. So I'm going to open up my gradient tool again, and we're going to switch this from radial to linear. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 shades of brown. So if you double click on the color here, we can choose a darker brown, and then here on the other side I'm going to choose a lighter brown to make this look like it has kind of a round shape there. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to grab our ellipse tool, and similarly to what we did with the striped pool ball, we're going to create a stripe here on this pool stick. So I'm going to make one oval that's going to create a little nub here at the end. Maybe I'll copy this circle and I'll drag this down. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these 3 things. So if you take your selection tool and just click and drag over from the side, you can select those 3 pieces. And then we're going to use our Pathfinder to divide it just like we did previously. So we'll divide it, and after we divide it, we need to ungroup it. So you can either go under Object, Ungroup, or you can right click, Ungroup. Either one will do the job. After you divide it, deselect it, and then get rid of the extra circle lines because we don't need them. Now I'm going to color the stripe here using my gradient tool over here. So I'll switch that from brown to gray, and the other one from brown to white. And then the top piece, well, I'm going to change that to black and gray. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and select those 3 pieces. So when you divide it, it cuts it through there. So we're going to select those 3 pieces, and then we're going to group them back together. So you can group it by either going to Object, Group, or you can right click and group. Once you group it, you can move it as one solid piece. So we'll put this over here. I'm going to spin it a little bit. So I want it to look like it's getting ready to smack this pool cue. I'm going to grab this other one, and we're going to use this one to be a cast shadow here. So I'm going to spin this around a little bit, bring that in relatively close there. And then I'm just going to make this a solid gray. So I'm going to use my swatches, and I'll make that gray. And then I'm going to use my transparency tool, and I'm going to switch that from normal to multiply. So then it'll create a little cast shadow underneath there. So we've got our 3 balls and our pool cue. So we're ready to play.